live stream. So it's just the three of us on right now. There's no one else on. So I'll wait to hit record.
Okay.
Now it says the one says it's on live on YouTube. The other one says it's setting up webinar for YouTube Live. Preparing live stream. So it's just the three of us on right now. There's no one else on. So we are.
It's Jesse James Tucker, and I've got some big
commercial beforehand.
We're live. Here we go.
All right. Well, so good to have all of you joining us here tonight. We're here with Pastor Brian and we're with Paul Huber. Paul, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great.
Good. Well, we're so thankful that you took time out of your busy schedule to be here with us. And we really want to discuss and ask you some questions about your new book, Killing Complacency. And so we're really excited about that. But before we do, Pastor Brian, I want to ask you a question. I know that the governor today released some other businesses. I know movie theaters are in that category. How does that affect CR First? Does that move up the opening? What does that look like moving forward?
Yeah, so we've been working on this quite diligently and watching everything. And actually it changed some things today for us. So what we're looking at, we're already in process for this week. We were not able to open up on the 24th. And what we know is for us to be able to handle all the things that we're going to need to do, cleaning and in and out, that we need 1 week that's just kind of we're calling it a soft launch. Be a special invite. And we're still going to do kind of a video sermon, but we'll have a few people in, and we're just going to do one service. So people that are watching here probably have access, we'll see, but it's going to be very limited invitation to the 31st, but really on June 7th, we're going to open up. We're going to have 3 services. And as of right now, it looks like we're going to do a service at 9, 11, and 1 p.m. all on Sunday.
Come on. Woo.
So we know we have to space chairs and have social distancing, and we have to clean in between services. There's pretty significant recommendations, guidelines that we have to follow as we walk through this and are open to the public. And we're looking forward to it, though. So it's good. We're going to still continue everything online that we've been doing. That's not going to be any different than what we're doing up to this point. We'll still be fully online and fully available. But I'm looking forward to just the chance that we have to move forward and start having, time together with each other.
Yes.
And so I'm going to be putting an update on social media in the next 2 days and update our website with all what this means. But we're moving forward. And like I said, we'll have Memorial Day weekend this weekend and encourage people I can't wait. It's a great message. I'm excited about it. And the following weekend, 31st, actually, I asked Alan Griffin, who was with us in the winter.
I remember.
To be part of this series. And so he put a message together just for our church, just for this series, specifically to communicate. It's going to be great on the 31st. And then we're going to launch into our series on the book of Romans. And so our services will be a little shorter in person. Some people will be bringing kids. And we'll have some busy bags for the kids to help, but we're going to encourage parents to kind of, take some ownership as a family. But I know we've been talking to a lot of people, doing a lot of homework, and we have many that are ready to be back in yesterday. And some know that having their kids at service is going to be tricky, so they might wait a little bit longer, and that's totally fine. We get it, man. Wherever people are at their comfort level, we don't want people to come and feel overwhelmed or feel as if they don't connect or maybe just emotionally and health wise. We've got some others. I think one of the hard ones this week for me was Alo Bell, who's I think the oldest person that's part of our church. She's 100 years old. It's at a birthday party earlier this year, and she just was confirmed with coming down with COVID and home that she's in. And so this is impacting our church in many different ways, and we want people to be healthy and be safe and handle things wise and as adults, which I think kind of everyone will. But so the plan is June 7th will be probably about 200 people, 200 or 300 people for each service, kind of the goal. And that should give us more than enough for people to come back and worship together.
Come on. I know that is going to make a lot of people happy to hear that news. I know we have had so many people just can't wait to get back and to see one another again. And so June 7th, get ready. The church doors will officially be open. And so now I want to turn kind of our direction here. And Paul, I want to kind of ask you some questions about your new book. This is so exciting. And your book is titled Killing Complacency. And so what inspired you to write this book?
Well, Pastor Nate, I guess I have to be honest here. It really came as a surprise to me. I didn't wake up one morning and say, hey, I want to write a book. I woke up one morning and said, I've been learning a few things and I want to do this one-page study about what I thought was important at the time, which was the growth mindset and the infinite God that we serve and how the two can play together. That's and good. I got into a little bit. I did this one-page study with the guys at church, and then I wasn't completely satisfied with that. I'm like, man, I've been learning a lot of things lately. I've been reading a lot of books, listening to a lot of great speakers, and I want to try to, at least for my own purpose, get my philosophy together and just get it down on paper. And that's all I really wanted to do, was just kind of outline things and kind of figure out what it was that I was looking at and what I was thinking about. And over time, over the last couple of years, it's really evolved from just that basic outline of what I was thinking and trying to, if you will, just trying to figure out some of the dichotomies I see and some of the things that I felt maybe didn't motivate me the way they should. Mm-hmm. And just trying to sort all the things out. And through that process, it morphed from, well, man, I've got this idea, to, wow, this is tens of pages. And now it's 170 some pages. I just can't stop.
That's awesome. I love that. That kind of is where it started for you. You know, It wasn't something that you just said, I want to do all this, but it just continued to build and build. And like you said, to have the amount of pages that you've written, killing complacency. In order to kill something, you have to know what it is. And so, like, for you, what did complacency look like in your life? How did you discover it? Because I know a lot of people are going to read your book and go, okay, I need to figure out how I can do that too. So kind of walk us through what that looks like in your life.
Right. So I think part of it was just trying to sort out the difference between contentment and complacency, and trying to, if you will, slice the two sides of the same, what seemed like the same thing, apart. Yeah. And we hear the message a lot about the Apostle Paul and saying, I'm content in having a lot, I'm content in having a little, and the things that he experienced and how he encouraged contentment. But it was clear that he wasn't complacent. It was clear that he wanted to spread the gospel to all of Asia, to all of the known world at that time. And he talked about pressing forward. And so to me, that difference was understanding what you have to work with, and then being content with who you are, how you're made, and what you feel you're called to do, but still pressing forward and not being satisfied with the status quo, and understanding where it is that you need to grow, where you need to push forward. And I saw that kind of in my own life, in terms of, well, maybe I wasn't pushing forward hard enough at work, or pushing forward hard enough in my marriage, or at any of some of the other important things in my life. And so there was really a lot of trying to figure out what the right way to push forward was. And so I dug in there and tried to dig into that difference between contentment and complacency. So that's really part of how the book opens, is understanding the big lie of contentment, because contentment is important, but when it turns into complacency, that's kind of the bad side of contentment.
That's good.
I love the question you asked, Nick, because how do you have to know if you're hunting, right? If it's rabbit season, quote, or duck season or rabbit season, right? You got to know which season it is.
Yeah.
And I think most of the time people don't really understand the definition of what contentment is. contentment is biblical, right? Deep-seated contentment. I don't need anything else in my life. And sometimes people think that a drive, and I know, Paul, we've talked about this too, that sometimes people think a drive is, maybe it pulls away from our spirituality. But I don't see it that way. I think God's created us to be driven. He's created us to chase and to get the best. What contentment is that drive doesn't motivate my soul. It doesn't motivate my being. It doesn't motivate my purpose. It is me getting the best yield out of what God's placed in me. And those are two very different things. Complacency, I think, is my biggest frustration. I think right now we're going to see, I'm talking about a little bit on Sunday too, because we're seeing that happen with isolation. There is all kinds of complacency that's taking place right now. And so I want to talk to you, Paul, maybe a little bit. How do you define, because you talk about this, because I think success is our duty, right? It's this phrase that you use in your book, that we do have an obligation to be successful. And there's different ways people can take that, right? One way people can take that is that, well, you have to be driven and step on anybody at any cost and cheat and just drive, don't have a family, it can wreck your family. We've seen it when the contentment's not right, but that drive for success can be devastating. But scripturally and spiritually, what did you learn on this journey about success and really God's call to us in this?
There's probably two aspects I want to emphasize here. One is that we're all here to serve one another. And whether that's leading a church or mowing a lawn, whatever the task is, we're here to serve our fellow humans. And the result of that, if you're doing it well, if what you're doing is valuable and you serve in a way that helps other people and is valuable to them, that should come back as something where you get paid to do it. And yeah, there's certainly things where we want to volunteer, we want to help others out of the goodness of our heart. But the work aspect and the aspect of our lives where we do get that income in exchange for the time that we spend at something or the value we provide to someone else, that's important. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that, and we over spiritualize the guy behind the pulpit versus, well, that's his calling and he's called to do that. But the guy or gal serving coffee or mowing a lawn or engineering a GPS receiver, those are all important roles, and there's nothing less spiritual about it. It's just a different calling. And I see a lot of Christians just saying, well, I'm not as spiritual as this guy or that guy that's up in front of everyone else. And well, that's not my calling. And so if I'm not living out my calling, I'm not being obedient to God. Yeah, it's certainly a great job to have a very important role, but if we lose sight of, well, my time right now is supposed to go here, my calling maybe evolves over time, but we just kind of lose sight of what the importance of serving others and doing our job well.
Yeah, I think it's so key because I've wrestled with that over the years, right? For many years, I trained young people to go to ministry and other things, and I help them understand this calling. All of us are called. Every person is called to follow God, to serve him. And then there's specific roles that we fulfill. There is no one more spiritual than anyone else. All of us, like even the pastor's role, is to help equip the saints to do the work of the ministry, to help people do the ministry and do what you're called to do, and to chase that and to think that, well, I'm lesser. Even roles that we do in the church, we run into that, quite a bit. So just opening a door for somebody, like, that is huge. We don't understand how God uses that, and everything that we're doing, we should do it with a level of excellence and focus.
That's right.
I love, Paul, because you did fix the parables, all right, and he kind of took on like the talent, which is always we use that terminology, and because most of us think talents is like Michael Jordan talents, And it's a financial resource is really what we're talking about there. But what did you learn, when you dug into those parables?
Well, the thing that strikes me when I dig into the parables is it's not a story of something that actually happened. It's purposely written or told in a way that Jesus chose. He could have it end any way that he wants. But when you look at it, you look at the guy that got the 5 talents initially and turned it into 10. The master said, "Good and faithful servant, well done." He multiplied that financial resource. And the servant that got 2 talents had the same sort of response. But the one that was given 1 talent, he had it taken away from him. I mean, that wasn't just an example of something that happened in a story that Jesus heard about. It was his message. If you are not faithful with even getting that little bit, it will be taken from you. And so, I see a lot of people being financially irresponsible, and it's that idea of that talent they've been given, the little bit of money they've had is taken away from them because they've not been responsible with it and worked to multiply it.
That's great. I think I'm saying that. I love how you're saying it, because it is critical that we understand all these pieces that we have in our life are spiritual. Like that,
right.
I think people forget. This is all of our spiritual work. It's a part of our spiritual journey. It's not, there isn't, we used to kind of went through a cultural piece where this is secular and this is sacred. And we have to live our lives in a way that everything is sacred. There isn't a secular piece of my life. Every part of that's paying bills. That's what I purchase. That is, the subscriptions I have a part of. It's how I use my free time. It's what TV shows I watch and what things I interact with online. Everything is sacred because it's all a stewardship process of what God's given us.
And, absolutely, there's a time for rest and recuperation and preparing for that next season or the next day even, right? Getting that good night's sleep. And so it's important to do things like that. But Proverbs really gets into, well, don't go past what's necessary. And because, a little folding of the hands, a little reclining and relaxing, it turns into lifeless sloth or not doing what you were meant to do. And the important thing about success is if you don't succeed, who else loses? I mean, your family doesn't have what they need. You're not able to give to the church to do the other things. And a lot of people hit rough times, and a lot of people have challenges. And right now is a tremendously challenging time for many people. But at sum total, at the macro level of a person's life, are they working towards being successful and making the most of what they've been given, or are they just getting by, or worse, expecting someone else to help them out? And
I love, because I think you're right. We can't look at rest as a negative, because scripturally, what the Bible talks about a Sabbath, and it's teaching. I wish we did more. Actually, we're launching something called Emotional Healthy Spirituality, where we talk about Sabbath quite a bit. But most people in America, what we do is we work until we crash, right? Like we work so we can rest. And scripture reverses it. Scripture says, no, you rest and you pour out from that. Your work is poured out. You work from your rest. That you feel your rest isn't about collapsing and just doing nothing. That rest from a scriptural perspective is filling up. So
that's good.
Pour out. So I'm filling up. I'm physically ready. I'm emotionally healthy. I'm spiritually ready. I'm intellectually filled up. So then I can pour out and go. And in most of us, we kind of go work, stop, work, stop. And that's just not the scriptural approach to how we're to chase after and how we're to pour out from what God's given us.
Right. And athletes have a term called active recovery, where they'll do the tough workout one day, and then the next day or a couple days later, they'll do a small workout to get the lactic acid and the other things out of their system. And, I think in the non-athletic term or view of that, it's like, well, spend your morning doing the intellectually challenging things, the really hard things, midday and later do the things that are less challenging. And in the evening, use your time to recover, and not in a way that completely checks out, but, read a book, do other things that help you learn and build and prepare, so that you can work with the natural flow of your energy throughout the day, and to not overdo it, and to not underdo it.
There's a chapter in your book, Paul, that I'm really interested in. I just want you to elaborate on it. It's chapter 10. It's called The Passion and Purpose Driving Your Life. How does that title fit into the book, Killing Complacency?
That chapter and the title and even the contents there, it picks at some things I think are pretty common myths and misconceptions, right?
Okay. Yeah.
There are a lot of people that expect that call from heaven, the voice to say, your purpose is to do this, or that overwhelming passion that they get at the end of high school, right? I mean, you at the end of high school, you're supposed to go pick a college major and then go spend the next 40 years after college doing that major. And the reality is, people often find things that they're passionate about and get excited about, not by just having that come upon them at the end of high school. It's really something that you discover over time. And you can spend a season, and high school is a great time to do it, but even young adult years, spend a season trying to figure out what you like, trying to figure out what's enjoyable, and then pursue the thing that gets you excited. There's a great example in the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, where she talks about how the passion doesn't come up upon you all of a sudden. It's there was someone that was in the janitorial business. It's not glamorous or sexy or wonderful, but they're in the business, and they really developed a passion for that after having been there a while and having some favor in their life for it. And they've really they built a big business out of it. And it's not something you get done with high school and, I'm passionate about basketball or art or whatever, but you get into doing the job, and you get you find kind of that field of favor, if you will, and you start pursuing that. Where have you had success? And really pursuing those things that give you the decent reward and that you get excited about, and don't wait for that voice from heaven.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with motivation. Motivation doesn't come from the spark that propels you forward. It's you start moving forward, and then you feel motivated to do more.
So I think one of the things I want to encourage those we got several that are on YouTube, and quite a few that are on Zoom as well. If you want to put a question for Paul, for us, we'd love to answer those. We love chatting about this. It's kind of just fun. We get together, chat is fun for me. I know next week I've got Dr. Joseph Lear coming in, and he's going to connect with us. And then I got Dr. Alan Tennyson and Dr. Mark Zweifel and Dr. Carolyn Tennant. So a lot of friends. I love that Paul's with us, and really, Paul, even the book that you talked about, you and I have talked quite a bit. We've been connecting on a lot of different things. That Grit by Angela Duckworth is a fantastic book. Like, those kind of things are good. Like, what other things have you been reading that have just been inspiring you?
One of the big inspirations lately is I joined a group called 100X, and the speaker there is Pedro Deo, and he's been talking a lot about some of the same principles that I had and worked through as I discovered the book, or worked on the book, and I got basically done with it and found his community on Facebook, and it's very much aligned with what I've been thinking. It talks about kingdom entrepreneurship and talks about what it means to use the talents you've been given. So that's really been my latest inspiration, if you will. I did a count. There's something like 70 books cited at the end of my book. So there's a lot that went into it. And what I tried to do is just synthesize what came in from all those books and correlate that with scripture, because what the Bible tells us is true and important, and I try to filter everything I read and learn through that. But there's so much else out there that's instructive and that helps us learn more and different and deeper things about life and how we're made. And so I really looked at a lot of different sources as I went through the book.
I think there's an old adage, and I'll get in trouble for saying this, but I'll say it anyway because that's it's my job. But so many people say the only book we should ever read is the Bible. I'm like, well, the Bible is the key book for you to read in your life, but you need to read more than that. Otherwise you can end up stupid. Like this is part of God's put things in front of us to learn, to glean, to encourage. Mm-hmm. Here's the piece that always got me on that. Jesus, when he taught, did not teach the whole Bible. Jesus, when he was here, he only taught specific things that had application to how do we live this out. And so God's giving us the brain and the resources, and he wants to work. We're going to talk about this Sunday. God wants to elevate our mind to make sure that we are approaching things right and using what he's given us and think deeper and better. Someone had a question, and it's kind of interesting one. I think when you're starting to chase something, so purpose, you're talking about it. Do you have to have an idea first, or do you just start doing something? Did you try to plan it out, or should you just start doing? What do you think?
Right. I get in trouble with some of my engineering friends where they say, well, you don't have the whole picture together, or you don't have all the plans together. Well, I'm not a bullet, right? I can aim, I can fire and then aim and adjust. But you have to do something, right? You can't find direction without at least doing something and figuring it out. So, and the great thing about my situation in writing the book is I've got a full-time job and another side hustle. I don't have to write a book. I'm not dependent on getting that one thing done. And so I've had the luxury of exploring and figuring it out. And the draft that you saw was nothing like what the first draft was. I got through it, and then I looked at this book about how to frame a story called The Story Grid. And that really helped me kind of see, well, how can I put some more action in there? How can I make it more dramatic or lead the reader through a different path? So, it's good to have a general trajectory, a general plan. And I talk about that a little bit in the book too, of you want to have a success-oriented trajectory, but what exactly that looks like, that can change, right? It's just that general trajectory that you need.
Oh, Nate, you're muted.
There we go. Paul, if people are interested in checking out your book, when will it be available and how can they get a hold of it?
It's currently on pre-sale on my website. That's pauljhuber.com. And the J is important. If you just go to paulhuber.com, you get someone else.
Okay.
Who's a locksmith. But if you go to pauljhuber.com, it's got my book on pre-sale. It's $16.99 right now. It'll be on Amazon in a while. I've got a sample of the cover in from, I'm working with a kind of an independent publishing house. And I know there's at least a few other people in the church I've talked to that are interested in writing books. And the way it's been working for me with this group is I got what I thought was done and then met up with this publisher, and she's like, well, I help people do independent publishing. And she walked me through the process a little bit. She's got someone who does cover design. So now I've got a great looking professional cover that's way beyond my skill level in Photoshop. And they're working on the interior right now. So that's the next big milestone. I have all the text there together and written up and formatted pretty decently, but they'll make it really look professional. Yeah. And so there's a few more process steps we have to get through. It'll go on Amazon pretty soon and we'll get it up there, but it is certainly online for pre-order right now.
So I froze up for just a second. Sorry if it's me over on the other side. But I just want to applaud you, Paul, because writing a book it's an accomplishment because it takes work. Like a lot of people have an idea of writing a book. All of us, there's many people that want to write a book, but you have to do it. I mean, you just do. It's about doing. There's no other. It doesn't magically appear. It's sweat. And I know we talked a lot of Saturdays where you were hanging out at the coffee shop and writing, working and getting it done, and that's pretty awesome. Hey, there's a quote in your book I want to read, and maybe talk about this for a second. It says, "Success produces sustainable benefits in a way that charity cannot. Charity is important, but it relies on the overflow of success. The process of successful commerce benefits all who are involved in producing it, resulting in the ability to produce even more." What were your thoughts behind that? Because I think, sometimes we don't always think of, success and charity and the components that go together with that. But how's that worked for you? How have you worked in living that out?
Well, that's really kind of the capitalist extension of give a man a fish and feed him for a day and teach him to fish and feed him for a lifetime. It's really taking that to the next step of, well, teach them how to run a fishing business, teach them how to build something of value. And one of the great examples I saw of this, and I want to thank Tom Popelka for telling me about the book, is in a book called Beginner's Pluck. And the author wanted to help women in Africa get an education because it was so important to her that they be able to go to school, because that is the gateway for further success in where they're trying to get in that African country she was in. And she said, well, I only have so much money. But she figured out how to make a sandal business where the women in the community in Africa worked together to make sandals that then were exported to the United States and sold. And now she's been growing that business. And that's something where that author and other people, they can give, but they can only give so much. And yes, there's great abundance that many of us have that allows us to give, but by being able to set that community up to sustain what they're doing, that's something that they provide value to others, and then they get income, and then they can go to college. And that's really what it's all about, is you provide value to someone else and they provide value to you. And it started with bartering, but now the best form of that is money. You provide a good or service, they pay you, and then you can go do something with that. And so that's a great sustainable way to build in developing countries, especially.
So in work I've done, one of the things that we've added a phrase at the end. So if you give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man a fish, feed him for a lifetime, but help the man own the pond. Who is it that owns the pond? Because otherwise they're still indentured to someone else. And kind of reminds me, I told the story a little bit, but different. A couple of years ago, I got to be at the presidential prayer breakfast, and on one side of me, I'm sitting with Dennis Prager. He's on that side. A lot of people know. I had no idea who he was at that point, other than people were coming up and taking pictures with him, which is a no-no in that setting for anybody, because there's a lot of big names. But for Dennis, they wanted to do it. Real nice guy. I mean, but I was more interested in the conversation I had with the guy on my right, who grew up as he called it, a street rat in Mumbai, India. And he goes, I learned to code. Like every street rat in Mumbai, we learned to code, and got a job in a company, worked well, got moved around internationally, married a girl from Venezuela when he was living in Venezuela for a while. And when I met him, because he was now retired at 43 years old. He built a company, sold it, and will never have to work another day in his life. And then went back to work for an international piece. And like, this is where I think that comes from, right? Because he's able to give back. So he signed a 5-year contract for $5 to be, he called it, he goes, yeah, I'm a volunteer CEO of a nonprofit in Africa. So it's one of the nations in Africa where they're working on other community. But he was really quick to tell me, he goes, I hate charity. Right? I hate charity. Charity's terrible. So what we're doing, even if it's just $1 in, people have skin in the game, and I want them to help. I want them to own the pond in a sense, as what he was saying. And he was teasing at one point. He said, "No, I'm 3 years into my contract and I haven't seen a penny from them yet. So I'm hoping good for the $5 at the end of the 5 years." But to have that concept of being able to give back, right, out of the overflow and the abundance of the lives that can change. Now there's a whole, hundreds of thousands of people that are going to benefit from his capacity to get the best yield out of what God had given him, and now flowing back in there through life, which I love that concept. So it isn't teach them to fish, teach them, but also help them have ownership, because ownership is critical.
Right.
Let's see. I love it. Bobby Joe's giving us he's got some dreams, and I love them. They're pretty awesome. I want to encourage you to keep chasing them. Yeah, there are some things, because I think that's the other piece, maybe Paul, on this, is sometimes people have a dream, and dream is plan A. But a lot of times we have to start with plan G, and we have to work up to plan A. But what can you do that'll start now, that you can do with the time you have, with the resources you have, with the capacity you have, that'll get you started on that path to plan A? If you kind of, I know, and even in the other group that you've been a part of, how have those kind of decisions or conversations been? Because it's kind of an entrepreneurial startup kind of talk.
Yeah. There was a great example, and I was able to talk to him a little bit about it a week or so ago, where he talks about David, and I talk about this a lot, is, David, yeah, he was anointed young as the future king of Israel, but he had a lot to do to walk into that calling.
Yep.
He got that anointing, and then he went back to being a shepherd. And those bad days as a shepherd, when a lion or a bear comes in and tries to take your sheep, he didn't complain about it. He just took care of the bear and the sheep, or the bear and the lion, and he was able to hone his skills. I'm sure he spent many days of boredom just with that slingshot, killing some trees and bushes and shrubbery, and then eventually the bears did come, as they do, and the predators come and try to take his sheep, and he took care of them. And by working through that, he was prepared to go meet Goliath. And when he met Goliath, he brought basically a gun to a knife fight, right? And a guy in armor is, at least in my mind, a lot less scary than a lion, right? The lion can run a lot faster. He can catch a gazelle. I can't catch a gazelle. But he's got that slingshot, and he's there ready to take out Goliath and his brothers and anyone else that'll come, because he spent that time preparing. He spent the time preparing when it wasn't important, when it wasn't a high pressure situation. Losing a sheep here or there sometimes happens, but he was ready for it. And when it was really important, when it was important for the kingdom of Israel, he was there to take out Goliath. And when King Saul had his terrible headaches and was afflicted, he was there in the king's court, learning about what went on and learning about that royal lifestyle and what happened. And so he's there soothing the king, but also taking advantage of what God had called him to do at the time, and learning about the situation. And he learned to become a warrior. He learned all the many things about becoming a king long before that was his responsibility. And that was kind of his ultimate responsibility and his ultimate calling. But along the way, there were a lot of stepping stones, and he was faithful in meeting those stepping stones. And I think that's so important. If our lifelong plan is to get to that big goal, that goal Z, milestone Z, you have to get through A, B, and C before that.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes it changes. You have to go to plan B or C, but you have to work through that process of achieving your goals and growing into that ultimate calling that you've got.
Yeah. Last question here, Paul. What advice would you give to someone who feels like maybe they're in that shepherd season, where they feel like they have these big dreams? Maybe they even got a startup, like, David was anointed. Then he went back to doing what he was doing for a long time until that Goliath moment. What's the short answer to give some advice to someone who feels like they're in that season and they feel like they're not going anywhere or growing?
Absolutely challenge yourself during that situation. I know right now it's easy to pull back and to kind of relax through the quarantine.
Yep.
I haven't had that luxury. I've been an essential employee and I've worked at my day job every day online and telecommuted mostly to my work. But I think there's this tendency of, hey, enjoy the moment, relax a little bit, but press in. The number one thing to do is take care of yourself, make sure you're healthy, and then work on yourself.
Yeah.
If you can't get into the office, do something that will help you improve and challenge yourself. And to the extent possible, find someone to come alongside you. Sometimes it can be hard. Sometimes that person alongside you has to come through a book or other media, but get someone beside you and work with someone that will challenge you. If you can't challenge yourself, find someone that will challenge you and just kind of push through and work on it.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid of the pain of the workout, because the bigger muscles come on the other side of that.
Exactly. I mean, David, I'm sure there were moments when he was a shepherd, he had to kill complacency. He could have just sat around, like you said, killing trees, right? He probably worked on his craft, but it was because he wasn't complacent. He didn't just sit down and just wait for the kingdom to come. He got better. And when that moment was at his doorstep, he was ready. And so I just appreciate your time here, Paul. Thank you so much for answering our questions. Again, make sure you go and pre-order Paul Huber's book, Killing Complacency. Pastor Brian, I want to give you the last word here tonight.
I probably appreciate it. I love it, man. We've been talking about this for a long time. I love being able to put this together and taking the time. For those who joined online, whether on Zoom, and I know we got several on YouTube, we're going to jump over to the prayer service at 7:00. Love for you to join us for that. But we just really like having opportunities like this just to connect and to encourage each other, more conversational, and help us dig in and learn. So, man, we believe in you, Paul. Appreciate it and love it. And we encourage you for what's coming next. So I think I think we're good. So I think we're going to wrap it up, and we'll tell everyone we'll see you soon. Like I said, reminder, church is going to be back June 7th. So services, and we're going to try to make sure that we can separate time. So we're going to need some people to come to the 1:00 service so we don't get too full, because we do have to still practice, all of our social distancing through this, and we're limited for the capacity of the room. But we're moving forward. Here we go. All
right, cool. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, we'll see y'all later. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.